Hey everyone, Joe here. In this episode, Frank and I had the privilege of chatting with the Command Chief Master Sergeants in the Republic of Korea, the Wolf Chief Steve Cenov, the Mustang Chief Adam Vizi, and the 7th Air Force Command Chief Phil Hudson, three of my heroes. During our discussion, we explored various topics such as strategic leadership in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Korean culture, learning curves, and many, many more. I know we learned a lot during this discussion and hope you do too. Enjoy.
Life, learning, leadership, the Llama Lounge.
Yo, welcome to the Llama Lounge, a dialogue on life, learning, and leadership. This is Joe, and I have today with me one of my brothers, Frankie Z. What's going on, Frank?
Hey, what's going on?
Not much, man. Today we got some very special guests, though, don't we?
Yeah, I'm super excited. This is quite the circle here.
Yeah, man. So I've been having chills ever since. So we're only on like episode 8, and this might be the mother of all podcasts. We got the triumvirate with us right now. We have three of my personal heroes, and man, I've just had the honor to call friends. We got first the 8th Fighter Wing Command Chief, the Wolf Chief, Steve Cenov. What's up, bro?
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Yeah, what's up? And man, and we had the 51st Fighter Wing Command Chief, the Mustang Chief, Adam Vizi. What's going on, brother?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Stampede.
Yeah. And last but certainly not least, the great 7th Air Force Command Chief, former Mustang Chief, and one of my personal mentors I've always looked up to is Chief Phil Hudson. What's going on, Phil?
Hey, appreciate the info, Joe and Frank, man. I'm looking forward to spending the day with you guys.
Man, yeah, I'm not even joking that I had some chills because you know what happened? I was just having one glass of whiskey one night, and I decided, hey, I wonder if I just shoot them an invite if they'd say yes. Worst case, they say no, and then y'all all said yes. I was like, oh man, I need to ask people questions.
It was too easy, Joe. When we get a note from you, man, we listen.
Oh man,
yeah,
that means
man.
a lot.
I got chills too, man, but I don't have no pants on. So.
Oh yeah, thank goodness we're gonna only put out the audio on this one, but but some of y'all are missing a treat. So I'm trying to think back. I think the last time I saw Adam, I think it might have been back in 2016 on your previous tour and on my most recent tour, like when I first got there. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I was over at the 607th ASOG as the group chief over there.
Yeah, so yeah, it's been a minute there. And then I know for Phil, it was right before I left, before I went to Spangdahlem. I got to have some great lunches with you, and I really appreciate those. Those were great times.
A lot of fun, brother.
Yeah, and then Steve, it was at Spangdahlem before he snuck out, just like he always does without it going away. He just dips, and no one knows where he's at anymore.
I tell you what, the first time I met Joe, I think I was doing a senior NCO professional development event. And I see Joe and I really don't see his rank, and I'm like, man, that's a young master sergeant. and then I go up to him and I'm like, man, he has senior stripes on. And then I chat with him and I'm like, man, that dude has a line for chief. And I was like, man, I thought he was wearing his dad's uniform, man. I was like, man, how young is this dude?
That's the same way we feel about you, Steve. I mean, Adam, I look at you, man. I mean, the guy's got 3 days out from hitting 21 years in the Air Force, about to get graduated.
Joe, that's what I'm telling you, man. When I'm with these two guys, I love them to death. But it's just like big brothers, and you'll never grow up, man, because they just beat you down. But I love both of them.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love all you guys. You guys are awesome. So really appreciate it, man. And we all have lots in common, but extremely different backgrounds. So for our listeners, man, we typically try to keep things on the rails, but there's no promises today. But one thing that we all have in common is we've all are either in Korea right now or recently been. So I was wondering, we typically talk about everybody's living COVID-19 life a little bit different. Here at Travis and NorCal, every day I'm going to work, I found that more people seem to be on the roads. We were on full lockdown, shelter at home, and now I think some people are just sick of it. In the last week, I feel like people just like, we're done. We're just going to start going out on the roads early in the morning. But y'all have had like a whole different, Frank's been telling us it's been totally different than what we have. What have y'all been experiencing over there? Like, Steve, what's going on down in Wolfpack?
So yeah, we've been dealing with COVID really since January timeframe, and Korea got hit pretty hard with it initially at first, but the Korean government reacted to it really well and really aggressive. And I think one of the successes from Korea is the testing capability and the quarantine procedures that they went in place, and they really attacked it with speed and violence, and that's why they've been so successful to contain it. Us at the Wolfpack, we operated kind of with the same approach, and we were overly conservative on it, and we've been successful with it. But the quarantine of the folks, the reminding folks if they don't feel well to stay at home, and we're doing well. My biggest concern right now is that we're doing so well, and we're starting to open up the floodgates to letting folks from the United States to come into Korea, and Phil will probably talk to it from a more strategic level as far as the amount of personnel that we have coming into Korea are the ones that are infected, not the actual people living in Korea. And we're getting ready to open up the floodgates to start allowing folks to PCS here. And that's my concern right now. It's just, bringing in these folks from the United States that potentially have COVID, and folks on Penn, feeling like they can be more of at a relaxed posture, and getting some folks infected. So trying to maintain that battle rhythm of staying focused on, fighting and killing the virus right now.
Right. I can only imagine the political ramifications of that too, like in country with the folks over there, for sure. Man. So, hey, Adam, how's it different? Is it much different over there in at Osan?
So just to echo what Steve said is that, violence of action, and the way that we're able to wrap our hands around it and control and protect our perimeters from our new enemy, which is COVID-19. I think we've been very successful, specifically with the base procedures that we've been implementing, not just the base, but USFK writ large. I think our command has been very, very flat, transparent with communication. And I think that's key, is to not spook the herd, is to make sure that people understand, and everybody is mission essential. We don't have any extra airmen over here. So it's vitally important that we have everybody that's able to contribute to the mission. And so, that's one of the biggest things that methods that we used was our entry control procedures and standing up our COVID command and control center, and being able to take in information from the masses, and to be able to do that at a rapid pace, and to be able to lock down the base if we have to, or slowly, meticulously release people to go back and enjoy some liberties. And we've been doing that very methodically, and with feedback from everybody here on Team Osan and across the peninsula.
Right. And I think oftentimes, because, decisions are made and so many people aren't, in those rooms, to know that you guys do it so methodically and go through that deliberate planning, I think that's really beneficial for people just to kind of grasp and understand that don't get that opportunity. Yeah, appreciate it. Phil, so what do you kind of see it from a little bit of a different perspective, right? So have you seen some things? What's going on in your view?
Yeah, so we, you talk about the methodical, kind of leadership leaning in and discussing this out. We just until recently used to have a BTC every day. We don't do it on the weekends anymore, but we do it Monday through Friday. So we do about a 30-minute prep session with General Wilsbach, 7th Air Force Commander. And then we all get into a secure BTC with General Abrams, all the service components, their commanders and their senior enlisted leaders. And we discuss, the response mechanisms to how we can protect the force, which is how you protect the mission. And so, like Steve and Adam both said, it's just very methodical approach to things. It's a little bit different here over in Korea, obviously. Everybody over here affiliated predominantly with the DoD. So when General Abrams does a public health emergency, it allows him a lot of authorities to lock everybody on installations. To include, it allows the installation commanders to do a lot of things that you normally can't get away with in America. And like Steve said too, the Koreans are very good about being very compliant. So when their government tells them, "Hey, stay indoors," they do that. Not like us crazy Americans, that like you can't tell me what to do, and
Right.
which is part of the beauty of liberty. But sometimes, our common sense gets the best of us, or the lack thereof. But it really works well over here in Korea in the texting capabilities. Each installation has them, along with the Korean government. So the relationships are really good with the host nation. So very proud of that perspective.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add something else too, and Phil and Adam talked about it, is not just the relationships with Korea, but everyone on Penn, we're all in the same situation. So a lot of lessons learned amongst each other. So if Adam has something going on at Osan, we look at it and we chat about it, and we implement policies and procedures on Kunsan, and vice versa. So a lot of communication across installations, just to make sure that we get it right, because if something happens at Osan and we can prevent it at Kunsan, then we're going to capture those lessons learned and press on. And then a lot of the stuff that we do on Penn, Phil pushes out to his NAV counterparts, and we get a lot of inquiries in from different installations and different matchcoms and commands, just trying to figure out what we're doing here, because Korea was, the first really country that has U.S. bases being affected by it, and just capturing those lessons learned and pushing them out. So I think we're about 3 months ahead of everyone in the United States right now. But like I said earlier, it's maintaining that momentum and focus on it, because like you said, Joe, earlier, is a lot of folks are getting tired of being locked down,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of folks are just trying to go back to some sense of normal.
Right.
And we need to really be cautious of that.
Yeah, that's definitely. And Frank, I mean, you're kind of seeing it from more of the at the tactical level of what's going on. I think that because Frank's told us a couple times about like the environment that you guys are in is very different than what we were seeing, and a bunch of us are all over the place. Some of us are in Texas, some of us in California, one's in Dover, and Frank was talking about, I was like, yeah, here's the barbershop open. I was like, what? I was like, whoa, man,
yeah. You couldn't get a haircut. You couldn't get a haircut if you weren't willing to stand in line for an hour.
I know,
or two.
right? But yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, Julie became a great barber.
So, it's interesting to hear all three of your perspectives, and, from the tactical level, it's really shined a light on some team dynamics, right? And so when we get an order from the COVID cell, we got to come together as a team and figure out how to execute that at the squadron level. And it's stressful, right? It's a lot of, all right, how do we do this? How do we execute this? And man, you really learn a lot about your leadership team. And it's really forced us through those stages of team dynamics. And we had to get through some storming a little bit to be able to, at the end of the day, perform and keep our folks safe. It was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it's run like a military operation. If you think about ATO generation out of AOC, every day it's the same chop time that the components brief up General Abrams. He makes the command decisions, usually between 1500 and 1630 local every day. Then installation commanders usually follow on right after that with their team dynamics at the wing levels, about 1630 on to about 1730. Make some decisions based off the 4-star's intent. And then they communicate that via Facebook Live almost daily during the heat of the battle, if you will, with the populations on the installation. And then at that point, like Frank was talking about, where the squadrons have to pick up based off the new generation of orders of how to respond to that for the next 24. And it's just constantly every day on a 24-hour cycle, just like the ATO gets generated during combat, is how we're doing operations over here in Korea. I think that dynamic, because we're all war fighters, we understand that. And so there's no sense in changing the vehicle you use to respond. We're just combating an invisible enemy, but the same dynamics in place to protect the force in order to protect the mission.
Yeah, that's a great perspective on that too, and I think a lot of people are getting a lot of value from just kind of peering behind that curtain. One of the things, Phil, you brought up was compliance, and how the culture is so different. And a lot, I remember like being in Korea and being in Seoul, and that light says don't walk, and they just
Yeah.
don't walk, right?
Yeah.
And I think that culture is
Yeah.
is very. There's definitely a culture of compliance, but there's so much beauty and what happens in that place. What were some of the things that y'all thought, like, Phil, you've been there probably the longest, right? Here's like,
Yeah.
what are some things that like when you went over to Korea, what are some things that you find, so much value in, and maybe even some things that might have surprised you about the Korean culture?
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time during my career in and out of Korea. So a big part of it is I think it's kind of a homogenous type society to some degree, although it is changing significantly through the generations. What it means to be Korean. I mean, it's not just as unlike America. I mean, you ask someone what it means to be American. If you ask 50 different people, it's 50 different answers. Korea, on one side of it, it's a race of people, a tribe of people, if you will, that have a common ancestry. It's also on one side of it too. It's a foodie culture that loves Korean food, and that is part of their life, no matter where in the world they're at. They have to have that.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a crossroads of Pacific, So with Japan to one side and North Korea and China to the other, and the Philippines to the south. I mean, so you look at all of that, and Korea has a very dynamic history here. However, Koreans, if you think about it, relatively recent history, the early 1900s, prior to World War II, was a kingdom, and it was a united kingdom, and so that's fairly recent. So they're very, and to some degree, the majority of their history has been ruled as a kingdom, and a very authoritative type style of king, where the folks were very compliant. And then you add Confucianism and Buddhism,
Right.
and kind of the whole of how that works. You get a very regimented people. Unlike America, which we were the prisoners of Europe that escaped to the New World, and we got after it, man. So we're very independent thinkers, and which is cool for being innovative, but sometimes dangerous when it comes to the herd mentality, So
Mm-hmm.
we're the ones that are looking up in Seoul to see if we can dart across the road and make it right before the car hits us, So
I might have seen that a couple times myself out there.
yeah, so that is the main reason why the installation commanders had to declare a public health emergency to
Right.
not only have authorities over the military folks, which you have that, but predominantly it was their dependents, the military contractors,
Mm-hmm.
and all those folks, the other Americans over here that just didn't want to take the recommendations. So you had to get a little bit rough with them in order for them to realize that we meant business.
Yeah, for sure. That 100%. It's like, yeah, I remember seeing that in Itaewon, man. Just people running across the street, and they're always one of us, man. That's for
Yeah, I
sure.
know you're like, it's just face palm
Yeah,
always.
you're like, yeah, man. So, man, the foodie culture too.
Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you. I remember when my wife first came over, and she was like, "How are these people so skinny with so much great food?" Right? The food is amazing. I mean, it's not even just Korean food. It's like all types of food. They bring
Oh
in
yes.
everything.
Love the Asian fusion here, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool. Hey, Adam, when you rolled through, was there anything that kind of surprised you about Korea, like from your perspectives and views from even prior?
So I would probably have to say, not just to do a history lesson, but
Right.
just this is my fourth time in Korea, and just to see where this nation's gone
Right.
militarily and economically from my first time here in 96, 97 to where they are right now in 2020. And again, that shows pride of their people and their ability to adhere to standards and laws, because where they've gone from an agrarian-based society to a more of a, everybody's got Samsung, Hyundai, Kia, or something that belongs or just that sort of thing. And just to see how they've transformed as a society, militarily, equipment-wise, and their ability to to defend the peninsula. So
Right.
it's been pretty amazing over the span of years to see what they've done in such a short span of time.
Right. I mean, it's super humbling too when you look at it. I mean, how much they've learned and grown. I know my first tour there was in '04, and when I went back in 15, it looked totally different. I mean, like there was
Absolutely.
buildings, like just skyscrapers just showed up everywhere. And even on the installation on Osan, I remember how quick they built that parachute building. It was like it just flew up. I was like, how'd that get up so quick? I was going to get the Oriental House to go get some bulgogi, and I looked up and I was like, that building's almost done. Like, yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. So Steve, like, was there any big things that kind of shocked you or that you really appreciated around in the culture?
Yeah, so I was telling Phil the other day. So I've been waiting my whole life to come to Korea, and it was just eye opening. You know, talking to folks that have been there in the past, they're like, man, there's not really much out there in Kunsan. You know, it's kind of just like farmland, and that's what I was expecting. And having done a remote in Turkey before, and having been locked out on base for an entire year, I was like, okay, I can deal with that. And then when I get on that bus, you know, from the airport going to Osan, I'm like, man, there's a lot of skyscrapers out here, like more than New York. And I was like, this is completely different. And then even driving down from Osan to Kunsan, I was like, man, there's a lot of stuff out here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that impressed me the most is just like Adam was saying, was just their work ethic. You know, you look at South Korea 70 years ago, you know, and there were a bunch of farmers and dirt and everything else to where they're at right now, you know, one of the largest economies in the world, and one of the strongest militaries in the world. I mean, in 70 years, what they were able to achieve, I mean, their work ethic is like unmatched, you know, and like Phil was saying, just the family atmosphere and the dynamics that they have, very respectful people, very pride and passionate. So that's the biggest thing that I've taken away from Korea, just their work ethic and their family atmosphere. And they're great partners and friends and allies and stuff. I mean, you know, you engage with a ROCAF counterpart or a ROC Army person, and I mean, you sit down and chat with them for like 10 minutes, man, and they'll do anything for you. You know, they're really great folks. So just amazing. You know, I can't sell Korea. I can't say anything better about about being here, and just the partnership and then the alliance. I mean, it's just stronger and stronger every day.
Yeah. You know, that's a cool point. When you talk about like from just, 50 years ago to where they've grown to now. I remember reading a book that Joe Bass recommended. It was called The Power of Nunchi. And it kind of talked about like, that level of understanding and emotional intelligence and perspective and understanding people and working together. And they, because there's other countries that have been in similar, across the world that might have been given the same benefits, but they didn't like skyrocket the same way in their economy. And it's got to be something more to it, right? Like you said, the work ethic and everything else, because it's just amazing how much growth has been there.
You know, I think a part of it too, and Steve hits it, is that if you can partner with the great things America is about, equality, liberty, a free market, and all those things, if those type of relationships tends to lift everyone up equally in the nation. And so you can tell that, how it happened in Germany, our relationships there after World War II, how it happened here as well as Japan and Korea after World War II and after the Korean War. As long as the better parts of each nation are allowed to flourish, good things happen to everyone in those nations. So I think that, kind of what Steve's talking about, our relationship with Korea has gone back a long, long time. I mean, America had a treaty with Korea when it was the Kingdom of Korea. This was during Teddy Roosevelt's administration. So it helps too. I think General Mattis had said before, hey, never go to war with a country unless you read its history. And so I would say, don't, in order to respect the people that you're partners with, you need to know their history as well. And so I agree with you, Joe. I think it helps a lot to know. In order to know where you're headed, you got to know where you came from.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Man. So Adam, I got a question for you, man. I was wondering because being a battlefield airman in the position that you're in now of leadership, and as you're moving up, what were some of the things that you were able to kind of like leverage the skills that you had as a battlefield airman, and maybe some of the things that kind of were a little bit testy, like it made it a little bit more challenging to kind of adjust?
So I think that coming from the TAC-P background that I have is just explaining my experiences in deployment, because the majority of us have deployed. It's just a little different,
Right?
and to be able to explain, and
What is Steve doing?
I don't know.
I think Steve went over to hit the little Wrangler's room, man.
I think so too, man.
Oh, damn.
Sorry, I had to check on my laundry. I like to multitask.
You have to, yeah. And that's one of the just coming from the battlefield airman career field that I've come from, and to be able to go out and understand what an MSG is, or maintenance group, or med group, and to be able to tie into those people and explain, hey man, these are my experiences from living on Army forts, being embedded with the ground force, and being able to explain what the Air Force has to bring to bear for a ground force commander, and then being able to tell that story back to the airmen of, hey, if I wasn't in the right place at the right time in the country of Afghanistan or Iraq, and you didn't do your job to generate that air power, people would have not been returning to their families today. So the cog of the wheel, each spoke is so equally important that, if there aren't fuel on the line, or if there's not the base defended, or if the networks aren't defended, or if the pilots aren't medically cleared to fly their airplanes, if one of those spokes that holds the frame of the wheel, if it's weak, the whole thing collapses in on itself. And then, I explain my perspective. And I think that just having an understanding of the things that we do as an Air Force, the power that we generate, and being on the receiving end of it, and explaining that to all of our airmen, I think it's vitally important for them to hear, because every airman has a story. You just need to listen to it.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was thinking because I met a lot of battlefield airmen, and a lot of them are just phenomenal on the operational side. They just get it. They've seen it. They're experiencing things that are a little bit different. It's not as difficult to connect them to the mission. But then sometimes I see that maybe they have a little bit of a hard time transitioning to the seeing the rest of the picture too. And it's pretty cool because you were able to do that and then, move up and be an awesome command chief. That's pretty cool.
So I will add that it was a steep learning curve for me. It wasn't something that I was just able to initially just jump into. And I relied a lot on my chiefs, my peers. I shouldn't call them my chiefs, but my peers, to work me through it, so that we, as a collective whole of chiefs, could better support our airmen, all airmen.
Yeah, and I mean, it takes a lot of humility to be able to do that and accept that, right? And one thing I always think about whenever I think of Steve Cenov is humility. Like I mean, he's probably one of the people one of the most humble leaders I've ever met. But he balances it with confidence, man. I'm like, Steve, like when I first got to Spangdahlem, I remember talking to you, and like when we first had that conversation, I've just felt like I was talking to another person. I was just talking to a human being. And every time I talked to you after that, it was just great. Like and the fact that you will sneak out because you don't want to party before you leave, and those things, like, has that always been kind of like just innate in you? Like, is that just the way you're raised?
So it's funny. I was talking to had pizza with my ADL last night and smoked a cigar with him, and we were kind of chatting. Long story short, I went to high school with his brother in small Air Force, and so we had a cigar and we ate some pizza. I drank, he didn't. Hung out for a few minutes, and and he was kind of telling his story, and he fell down a lot in early in his career, and he learned a lot of hard lessons and stuff, and he's where he's at, and he's happy with that. And I was kind of telling him my story, and I grew up, born and raised in New York, and got into a lot of trouble, and tried to changed my life and come into the military, and had a really hard time early on as well. And I was really like almost 2 feet out the door, and had one good supervisor that kind of steered me in the right direction. And I never forgot that. So, throughout the years of different promotions and everything, I don't think I'm anything special. I just was smart enough to listen to a lot of great mentors, and that'll always be with me. And, until I take my last breath, is just remembering where you came from and stuff. So, like Adam said, regardless of the position you go into, it's a learning curve. Mm-hmm. And just being smart enough to open your eyes and some self-reflection of saying, I don't know everything. And, you're not weak by asking someone else for their opinion and asking someone else for a little help and guidance and mentorship. And, looking at my screen to Phil Hudson and Adam Vizi, both extremely knowledgeable and a lot more experience. So, relying on those two and getting different perspectives and stuff from other people, and you kind of learn from that. But, as you go, at least in the military, and kind of the way I look in life is, you're not going to be perfect. You're going to learn from other folks, and you're going to fall down and make mistakes and get back up. But as long as you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I'm doing the right thing, and you're living by your values, you're not willing to compromise that for anyone or anything, then I think you're set up for success. And it's never been about me. And when I leave an organization, I don't want people to be sad. I want people to hopefully have learned some lessons from me and then move on. Mm-hmm. But if I leave an installation or a group or a squadron or a flight and that place falls apart, then I didn't do my job. So yeah. I don't like saying goodbyes, because the Air Force is small and we always stay connected. Joe, I haven't seen you since Germany, and you're in California right now. We're on Zoom. Mm-hmm. Technology will keep us connected, but it's kind of just the way I live my life. And, it's, try to make an impact, whatever size impact in someone's life, and hopefully for the better.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's, definitely led to your success, but all your influence that you've had on people. I know you've had a lot of influence on me. And just like, and another person that had a lot of influence on me is Phil. I remember when I got even before I got my line number, you're just an amazing mentor to me. When I got my line number, I remember I called and was like, how do I be a chief? I was like, I have no idea. Right. Man. So it's funny. We were at the, I remember Juan Lewis said it. We were at the USAFE SEL summit, and he brought it up. He was like, well, we don't really teach people how to be a chief. We often spend so much time teaching people how to make chief or whatever rank. You could insert blank in there. And I was actually doing a Ask Me Anything right before this with the top 3 on my base on Zoom. And one of them, they asked me, I was like, well, how do you know if you're a good chief? And I was like, I don't. Like, I'm still working on that, every day. But I asked them, do you feel like you're prepped to be a master sergeant when you became a senior NCO? And all of them said no. They're just kind of left out. But and they want to immediately try to formalize some type of training plan for it. But I don't just like what Steve said. You kind of just need to lean on people and learn and fail. And I think that I really appreciated the time that I got to spend with all of you, and especially those lunches with you, Phil. I learned a lot about all the insights on, the goods and the bads that come with it.
Yeah, I do miss those times, Joe. It's always, and you kind of tell that's really the secret to success is finding people that you trust and recognize that can take care of maybe some of your blind spots. If you look around, our Zoom session right now, all of us have the same thing in common. We're not glory seekers. Rarely do you see us in the middle of a photo somewhere. We're usually on the edges of the photo, recognizing the airmen, just because we're out there getting motivated by their awesomeness, and so I just spent the last 2.5 days down at the Wolfpack with Steve, General Wilsbach, and I, and for me, I just, the energy levels I got just from being out there with the airmen, it was amazing. But it never was about me. It was never about Steve. We purposely made it that way. And but one thing he and I were chatting about right before we kind of finished up our trip there and getting ready to leave out, we're sitting in Steve's office, and we're talking about, the investment strategy that the Air Force provides to us is basic at best. It's because the expectation is that the Air Force is recruiting personnel that are independent thinkers, that are innovative. That's what they're looking for when they bring into the Air Force. And so at best, you're going to spend 6 months or less in formalized professional military education in your entire career. That goes all the way, if you want to count FTAC and then to ALS, all the way up to the Chief Leadership Course. The Air Force only gives us enlisted personnel 6 months in the classroom. That's it. So if you want to be a better leader, you got to surround yourself with folks that are leaders. And in order to do that, you have to be a self-starter, and you have to be innovative in how you get after that. So we don't want folks in the higher ranks that don't know how to motivate themselves, because if you can't motivate yourself, you can't motivate others. So I think that's why we're all drawn to each other, because we all have the same servant leadership perspective. And servant leaders want to be around other servant leaders because it's a flat organization. Nobody's seeking the limelight. We're all there to better ourselves so we can better our working environment for our airmen. So that's why I enjoy hanging out. That's why you and I, Joe, got along so absolutely well together, and now virtually together.
Yeah.
I very much have fond memories of our time sitting around chatting.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it means a lot. And so I remember when I was over there and you were the Mustang Chief, you would make every top 3 meeting almost. I can imagine you're there pretty much almost all the time. And one thing I remember that you talked to me about, and it was because us engineers were all in the corner talking to each other, right? And we're at a top 3 meeting. We could have been talking to each other in our own squadron, but we came to a top 3 meeting. We're all talking to each other. And you brought up the whole thing about being tribal. I was hoping you could elaborate on that a little bit, like what the issues with that is.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, there's a reason when you go to professional military education that they look at your AFSC on the roster and make sure you're not in the same flight, because it doesn't do any good to maintain because one, if you're in your own tribe, you're looking at yourself in the mirror. And the other part too is that what does that benefit your airmen if all you have is relationships with the folks in the same tribe? If you can't, and so that's why you see a lot of the times. So the forcing function for most of the time to break down the tribe is usually at the chief level. And so when chiefs, they have their own chiefs group meeting. So at that point, they have opportunity to build relationships across the tribes, badge agnostic. But when you're at the senior master sergeant level and below, there is no chiefs group meeting. So you tend to hang with people that you feel more comfortable with, which is folks in your own functional area. So it is not badge agnostic. You look across the room, and then your civil engineering badge starts glowing to point out, hey, I'm over here. Rally up on me. And so, but that doesn't do anything for your airmen whenever they need assistance. So that's why, when chiefs, it's really easy for chiefs to fix airmen problems because we like doing that. Or honestly, like I used to tell the senior NCOs, what we should be doing as chiefs is enabling our senior NCOs and telling them the importance of breaking down the tribes in order to cross-pollinate across the installation. That way, when your NCO or your airman comes to you, you're not tossing it up to the chief, which is basically usurping your own authority in the unit. And so you don't, instead of having airmen lined up outside the chief's door, because it's easy for a chief, we have relationships across the installation, and perhaps even outside of the installation across the Air Force, particularly at the command chief level, because there's a forcing function there. But at the lower levels, your role in life is not to hang with your tribe. Your role in life is to further your relationships, so you can be more of a benefit to your subordinates. Without that, though, you're not really value added, because anybody can be taught how to do your functional job. It takes a real leader to know how to step outside and get uncomfortable in a way you can be a better provider for your subordinates.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think Frank could attest to that. Like we were pretty always active in those professional orgs, and that's why I try to push it for a lot of people. And that because you get that you're building those relationships, and I always say relationships over network, just like you said, because networking sometimes it makes it feel like you're trying to I do something for you do something for me, but relationships
Right.
more like you're actually building that connection with people. But the other piece is how much you're gaining from those different perspectives that you're getting from other people. And it was funny because I've always had that thought, but I didn't even realize that we were doing it until you said something to us, because I was like, oh, we are doing that. I looked around, it's like we are all hanging out here together. And then it's interesting until someone like just points it out that you don't even realize you're in a silo. You're with your folks.
Yep.
There's I think when you talk to a few folks, you might you guys probably are familiar that you're going to get different perspectives on what they think of the top three. Not all top threes are created equal. Some might feel like, man, this top three is just it's political. I don't want to play these games. Everyone's just trying to volunteer to put something on an EPR or on a 1206, and that discourages a lot of folks, right? And they say, well, I'm just going to do an internal top three because we can control that a little bit more. What would you say to those folks that are discouraged about involving themselves with installation because they feel like it's political?
Adam?
Yeah. So there are certain AFSCs and certain groups that have difficulty getting away from their place of business during meetings when the installation is having their meetings. For instance, I'll just use an example: maintenance and med group. It's very difficult for both of those groups during the times that we meet. For those senior NCOs and airmen and NCOs to get and come over and attend their private organization / professional organization development. My challenge to them and my retort is always, are you telling me that it's not worth the time? That you can't do what you need to do without one person for 1 hour? If that's the case, then that one person is the house of cards, and you probably got bigger issues in your unit. So if it's worth the time to develop your people, give them the opportunity to go and be part of the base writ large for 1 or 2 or 3 people out of an organization. For those that are doing an internal top 3 or an internal 5, 6, I'm okay with that. But if you can't give the president or the vice president of your organization an opportunity to go and develop as an NCO, then there might. And I also tell them, hey, maybe you ask every other month to bring that meeting to you. Have them bring it over to the med group or out to the flight line. It'd be good for people in the mission support group and the ops group and the med group to get out to the flight line and see what goes on out there. So it's an opportunity that people need to take advantage of. And I think that being tribal is not an excuse. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I mean, perfect example, Joe and Frank, is what we're dealing with COVID now. And so, Steve and Adam both mentioned earlier that all the military is mission essential. Yeah, you are mission essential-ish. It's like everybody on our team's essential, but not everybody's mission critical. And so you've seen a lot of people went home. They were home for weeks, especially over here in Korea, hunkered down. And so, like Adam was talking about, I mean, if you're so damn special, you can't come up out of your house because the mission needs you so bad in your unit, you can't make a top 3 meeting, it's not about the meeting itself and the Robert's Rules of Orders and all that stuff, and the Treasury and all that report. It's about building relationships around the room and also having perspective of what's going on in the installation. I mean, a top 3 can be a strong, powerful capability for an installation commander to get after some things. But instead, if you just can't break away from your job, but we have proven during this coronavirus outbreak and this pandemic that folks don't need to be at work. Man, I go to staff meeting now, man, there's like 3 people in the room, me and the general and then the chief of staff. And then the vice is over in another room because we can't have him close, because, so we have like little silver team, a blue team. And there's maybe 7 people total in our staff meeting at the 7th Air Force level. There used to be probably 50 or 60. So I told the general, I'm like, hey, I think we should never go back to pre-COVID-19 days. I think we have learned some lessons now that maybe we don't need all these folks on the staff. Maybe we can send some of these folks back down to the wings. Maybe we don't need to have this many meetings anymore because you're just as informed as a warfighter without having this meeting, because we figured out more creative ways to get the info to you, which I think allows you now ability to actually free up people so they can get after things like defining what it means to be a strong leader in the year 2020, showing people how to get after using social media as a capability to lead in a virtual environment, particularly for senior folks that don't even have a social media account. Now they're leaning into it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Steve and Wolf, they did Facebook lives almost every day. Same with Adam and Mustang here. They did it every day. Most folks in their late 40s, early 50s don't have social media. Now they're having to, because that's how they communicate. So while coronavirus is absolutely a horrible thing, I think the lessons we're learning coming out of this, we should never go back to pre-COVID days. Because I like the way we're communicating now. We're actually more socially connected now than we ever have been.
Man, that's a great point. And, I've even noticed it in just my personal life. Before COVID-19, I would shoot a text out to somebody, and I'd shoot an email, and I'd go do whatever. But then I'm like knocking out tons of just administrivia and just running around with my hair on fire. Now I pick up the phone. I actually call somebody. I want to hear their voice, and it's like, it's weird. I was like, they're like, why are you calling me? I was like, why not? You ain't got nothing to do. We can actually talk like human beings right now. And I do think that there's a lot of cool things that have come from that. So you're spot on, man.
Yep.
Man. So, hey, I wanted to bring up a topic to you guys. As a question. So it's funny. I've heard this from a couple people, and I think it doesn't matter if you're a chief or whatever rank you are. There's this whole topic of sponsorship, right? And it's like, well, and I'm not talking about, somebody PCSing in sponsorship. Like, you have a sponsor to help you, and I think kind of help you navigate, but then also maybe help you break through some barriers in different positions. And I think one person that if I'm not even sure if I subscribe to this whole concept yet, because I fully don't grasp it all the way around, but a person that I would identify as a sponsor for me was Steve when we were at Spangdahlem, because he just straight up threw my name up there and said, hey, this guy should fill in for Command Chief sometime. He has he has it. He's probably going to be there one day, and he needs some experience. So put him in there. What do you guys think about that concept? Do you think, it's a thing? You think it's important? Is there issues with it?
So I'll throw this out real quick, and then I have used this analogy very often throughout my career, particularly for the last probably 8 to 10 years. In some way, so I'll take our officer corps, and I think we in the enlisted corps, we pride ourselves of being best ever. We tell the officers they can learn a lot from us, but I'll say this: we probably should sit back and just take a moment to reflect on how the officers develop themselves. And what I mean by that, so it's kind of the officer corps, based off their year groups, there's targeted times during their career that they should be surging into when it comes time for competing for big annual awards, stratifications, things like that. And then it just kind of like, it's always on an upward trajectory, but it gets to the point to where you get to that stage to where you've shown that you have the ability to promote to the next higher grade, and it plateaus off, and it's just a steady rise after that plateau to where you can show that you're ready to serve to the next higher grade. And so the officer corps does this based off of a year group, basically your commissioning year, and then whatever the plus is to where you should be at. And also, if you have the capabilities to serve as a DO, squadron commander, go off to school, come back, maybe do group command. And so it's very well built out. It is what we are trying to do in the enlisted corps called talent management, which we are absolutely horrible at as an enterprise. So what do we do to take that place? I liken it very much to the mafia. In this case, I hope a good mafia. But it's all about being, if you remember The Godfather, if you wanted to be something and you're operating in the AO of The Godfather, then you had to be a made man, right? And so in order to be a made man, somebody in the family had to absolutely bring you in. And so, how did they do that? Well, somebody from the family or somebody that was made would go out and walk around with you in the AO on the streets and say, hey, man, this is my friend Joe. Everybody's like, oh, crap, man, Joe. Somebody in the family knows Joe. And so now Joe has an opportunity to, the aperture gets opened up for Joe. So when you walk around, you're learning things now. And folks are kind of bringing you in. You're sharing the secrets of the family. The Air Force operates the same way. And I think in some ways that sponsorship. Should it be that way? No, because it comes across as favoritism to some degree. But the problem is it's capacity. And I look at it as an investment strategy. And this is how we need to explain it. It's like having children, and you love all your children equally, but all of them are adeptly different from each other. And so if you are going to love all your airmen as a professional, but you recognize and you look at folks that, that have a capability that maybe need a little bit more investment because their potential investment and the return on that is going to be greater than perhaps someone else. That's why people retire as tech sergeants, because, while they're phenomenal technicians, they didn't have the aptitude perhaps serve at a more operational level of leadership. So we left them at the tactical level, and that's fine. So their investment strategy is significantly different. Maybe you would send them to school to learn some more skills in their trade. With someone that has the capability to serve at the operational level of warfighting, that move up through the ranks in the senior NCO ranks, and you start sending them to leadership courses, because that's what keeps them motivated. So it's not like you're playing favorites. You just need to have a talent management system that is flexible enough to look across the spectrum that actually accounts for everyone that's worthy of investment, but it's not the same investment strategy. And that's what, unfortunately, we have right now. It's ALS, NCO Academy, Senior NCO Academy, and perhaps on the back end of this, Chief Leadership Course. That's all we've got. And that's the 6 months or less in a 30-year career that you get. And that cookie cutter approach is not applicable. So what do? We home grow a mafia, and we carve out our AO, and we start sponsoring people into the family. And to the outsiders that don't get sponsored in, it looks like favoritism. So that's kind of my analogy on that, Joe. But we need to do a better job, I think, as an enterprise. And I think number 18 is put a good foot forward. But we need to keep moving forward. So whoever number 19 is, number 20 is, number 21 is, needs to keep pushing it up. We can't lose our eye on the target because eventually folks will quit voluntarily sticking around our Air Force if they don't feel like they're valued enough to be part of the investment strategy. I know that's a long answer, brother, but that's what I have on that.
No, it's a great answer. Yeah, I'd love to hear if you got Adam, if you had anything to add on to that of what you think.
Sure, and I'll go right into the La Costa Nostra methodology that Phil was going with. There is this thing of ours, the mafia. So sometimes it could come across as favoritism, but I think that's what draws people into the military, is that that I'm going to get developed, and if I've got the chops and the talent, then I'm going to get opportunities. And it, again, may come across as favoritism, but coming from a very small AFSC, that was very prominent in the flights, in the squadrons, and of all of the TAC-P organizations that I served in, is that if you saw something in someone, and normally you were a leader of that flight or of that squadron, you would pull them in and pull them into the family and start telling them about, hey, this is how you get to do these sorts of things. This is how you're successful as a superintendent. I think that's what one of the things that we do well as an enterprise, even though we don't have it really drilled down to do it right. But I think that's what attracts a lot of people to come and serve in amongst our ranks. So having a sponsorship and being part of something bigger than themselves. I don't want to sound cliche, but honestly, that's kind of what drew me in and wanted to do the path that I chose. Somebody just got a text. It's okay.
It's always that. Any extra noise is going to be Steve.
Dang, fries are done.
I think he was doing vitamins earlier and pulling out pills. He was doing all kinds of stuff.
That fish oil sticks to itself. You got to shake up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you're on a leadership podcast and then you get cyber bullied, man. I don't think that's the message that we're trying to deliver out there. Whoever's listening, be better.
So since you conveniently interrupted Adam, man, Steve, why don't you go ahead and add your view on sponsorship?
So when I look at sponsorship, developing folks that you believe have the potential to serve in a better capacity. I think, the way the Air Force is structured right now, you kind of need that, because the Air Force is small and you get a lot of bro checks from folks. So depending on, and you can use it at the tactical, operational, strategic level. Not everyone knows each other, and when you're in different type of situations, people want to be comfortable with knowing that they're making the right decision, and the pace that we all operate at is difficult. So a lot of times, just to get a foot in the door, you need to be able to be connected with someone else. And like everyone was kind of talking to about different private organizations and different professional organizations, and that's a part of it. Building that network of trust, and your reputation carries a long way. So if you're a dirtbag at Spangdahlem, then you PCS another base, someone's going to probably bro check you, and that reputation and your work ethic and your character is going to come out. So I think sometimes you have to do that to give people just an opportunity to demonstrate, what they can bring to the fight. But you can't be the type of person that just sponsors everybody, because then you lose credibility. And then your word doesn't mean anything, So you have to be, your word has to matter, and you have to demonstrate that, when you're recommending someone for a different position. To me, it's not about favoritism. It's, if someone asks you a question, or, and you provide that input, and you're like, okay, tell me what you want to do long term, and I can kind of work and help you get there for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of folks, like you said earlier, Joe, that the fired up Chief Juan Lewis, who if he listens, hopefully he's doing better battling COVID. Mm-hmm. But everyone always asks, how do you get promoted? And how do you get promoted? And how do you get promoted? And mm-hmm. they're off vector right there from that question. How do you get great at doing your job, and how do you build others is probably the right question. But you never really get told of how to be a good chief or how to be a good leader. So I think it all plays a factor. But when you look at the sponsorship thing, if you feel that individual is going to be in a good spot and you can help them out, and give them a little nudge to get to the place where they probably should be going, then help them out and do your part.
Yeah,
it has to be for the right reasons.
Right. And I think some people miss out on the point that if you're, sponsoring somebody, you probably see something in them. Like you said, not just vouching for everybody and throwing it out there. But then on the other end of that, they got to perform, right? They can't just go and suck at it, and then now you lost your credibility. And to your point real quick, about the whole promotion thing, I've been thinking about this so much, and I'm like wondering, why is it that my last installation, probably it was the most people talked about it at Spangdahlem. I remember just people kept asking about it, talking about it, and I started getting frustrated. But then when I started looking at the culture that we've kind of put out, it's like every 2 weeks out of the year, it feels like we're talking something about promotion. Like, whether it's a message that gets sent out, or if it's you're doing an EFDP panel, or then it's like a AFPC message, how many people got promoted, then there's a promotion release. And if you start looking at it, it happens. So I could kind of see that why it's like, okay, if we spend so much time talking about it, I can see why it's so much on people's minds too. And it's unfortunate in ways that's the thing that we keep talking about so much. But
hey, Joe, I got a question here. Maybe it's kind of for, we've had this conversation on previous podcasts, and how, your journey to make chief, and then when you made chief, you're like, okay, now what? Mm-hmm. So for the rest of the chiefs here, Steve, Adam, and Phil, what are some personal goals that you're working on right now?
So for me, I'm really trying to work on my work family balance, and this has been like a journey for me, like the last few years, and I think I'm going to be better at it, reuniting with my family back in South Carolina. I spent a lot of time away from my kids. My daughter's 5 years old now, and in her 5 years, this is my second remote and a deployment during that time frame. And my son is 17; he'll be a senior in high school next year, and I've spent a lot of time away from him. So for me, I'm trying to do right by that. And for folks that are in similar situations, hopefully you can learn from me, because I'll never get that time back. So what I'm trying to work on is that my work family balance, and making every second count with them, because once they grow up and they're out of the house, then they're out of the house. I mean, they might come back and live with you for a little bit, eat mom's good cooking or hear dad's war stories and stuff. But that's really what I want to work on, and that's what's going to be my primary focus moving past Korea.
Awesome.
Man, yeah. It's funny what you just said about that is I remember hearing a podcast, and this dude was Jesse Itzler. He was talking about he's like part owner of the Hawks, and he said everybody looks at it like you got so much time, and people look at it in a weird way. And he was talking about how like his parents, they're getting up there, and he thinks maybe he hopes they live longer, but he's averaging maybe another 5 to 8 years. And he talked about like, oh, people look at it, I got 5 to 8 years, but he's like, I only see him twice a year. So I got like maybe 10 to 16 visits left. So, how am I going to maximize that time with them? When you look at it like that, it's a little bit different. You're like, oh, I got this many visits left.
Yeah. And COVID's a prime example. Tomorrow's never guaranteed. So, you got this pandemic going on right now, don't put things off for tomorrow, and tell the folks that you love and care about, man, that you love and care about them every day.
Yeah.
Adam, you working on any personal goals at the moment?
Always. I'm always trying to be a better husband, to be a better brother to my sisters. And in doing so, it's, obviously over here in Korea, haven't seen my family and my wife's family in quite some time. And that you just said, Joe, what you just said about the visits, man, that kind of rings true. Mm-hmm. And I never thought about it like that, because I lost both of my parents, and you don't get that back. Mm-hmm. You don't get the chance to go and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to spend some time with you. And Phil and I were on Quarantine University the other day, and mm-hmm. one of the things that I brought up, because the question was asked, is like, hey, what are your biggest mistakes? And my biggest mistake was I was in Savannah, Georgia, down south at a range when I was at the 25th ASOS in Hawaii. And my dad had relocated down to Swainsboro, which was about 45 minutes away from Savannah, where I was at. And he was like, hey man, I would love to see you. Why don't we get together and have dinner or something? I was like, Dad, man, I really don't have time right now. We're training. And I went back to Hawaii, and my dad died that next year. And I did not get the opportunity to do that. So that's one of the things that I'm working on is I want to work on making sure that my relationships with my siblings and my wife's parents, that I don't screw that up, because you don't get another chance. And a second thing that I'm working on is I just finished my bachelor's degree. It took me 28 years to do it, okay. But I took advantage of every dollar of my tuition assistance this year. I mean, I banged it out. And I know that if I can do it, our airmen can do it. And if you're listening out there, and education is one of your goals, is right now COVID-19. If you're holed up, what better time to take advantage of it than now to get into school and knock out those courses. So those are two of the things that I'm working on.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Adam brought that up. The same for me. I'm coming up on 28 years in the service, and I've spent about 22 plus years of my career overseas, and I missed a lot of my time with my parents. My wife's mom and dad have passed away. My father passed away a couple of years ago while I was over here, same thing. I didn't go home as much as I could, and I have a lot of regrets with that, man, a ton of them. So my mom is still with us. Thank God for that. But, I haven't seen her in probably over 2 years, and my running average was worse than that, man. I mean, I think I see my parents probably like once every overseas assignment. So you figure 3 years or so, then I would see them on the way I bounced back and forth between the Pacific theater and European theater, back and forth for 2 decades. And so, you take cot in the States, and you see them for a week or two, but what are we? We're motivated folks, man. We can't wait for the next opportunity to excel. And so I was always thinking of what I'm going to be doing when I get to my next duty assignment, and not really sitting back and enjoying my time with my parents. And I have a lot of regrets for that. My oldest daughter is 22 now. My youngest graduates high school next year, so she'll turn 17 next week. And so, this year for me, I probably made one of the toughest professional decisions that I've ever made, but probably the easiest personal decision I've ever made in my career, is that, I had asked and was approved to stay here in Korea, so my daughter can graduate here. And so personally, very rewarding that I'll be able to provide some stability for my youngest, because I could not do that for my oldest daughter. When I left Ramstein a few years ago to start this command chief trek, I moved into McGuire the week of Christmas in the middle of my oldest daughter's high school senior year. That was a significant emotional event for my family. And so, and I'll never forget the look on her face when I told her we're leaving. We're leaving Ramstein and her friends and her graduating class, so Dad could go off and do something new and cool. It wasn't new and cool to her, man. And so, so I promised myself if I'm ever in a position to affect positive change in my family, I would. Probably a little bit too late in some categories, but like that, Steve was saying, I don't think I'll ever get to a good work-life balance. I do think I can get to a better work-life integration. So, I take my daughters to graduations with me. I've done that for a few years, so mom can get a break. So because you seem to go to ALS all the time, although COVID-19 has kind of cut that out, or NCO Academy graduations, or all the quarterly award ceremonies or annual award ceremonies. So I would rotate my daughters into the lineup. And so that's one of the simpler ways that I could do that. And Steve, maybe when you get to South Carolina, when you're installation command chief again, and you'll own a big ALS, and you'll have a guy like me and Adam sitting on your yard going, "Hey, how come this stuff ain't fixed yet?" you can give your wife a break and rotate your daughter into the lineup to take her out with you.
I'm laughing on the inside.
I know you are, brother.
It's just really going to happen. So,
yeah.
But, man, I really appreciate you guys sharing that. I think I know me personally, I've been trying to figure out how to plan out more deliberate visits with the family, and then, put the phone down and all that. And it's tough, especially now with, the movement and everything, but it's something that we even all signed up for a half marathon just so we could be together, and that was forced for us to do it together, and that was kind of cool. And it also challenged us a little bit, but I always talk about, like, we can't waste time. Just it's a finite commodity that just you never get back. So awesome. So, hey, I really appreciate this time with you guys. I know Frank got a lot from it too, and all the listeners will. Like I said, y'all are my heroes. I really appreciate you taking the time and just giving everybody a little bit of your wisdom. And Steve, I also really appreciate all the extra noise you have going on there. So we'll try to edit all that out. I'm just kidding. No, but y'all are awesome. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's been our pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Frank. Love you guys, man. Yeah. Steve, I'll see you next weekend. Hey, folks, this is Steve's last weekend as the Wolf Chief. He flies out of here next Sunday, man. So, Adam and I plan to have one little hug fest with him, COVID-free hug fest, this coming Saturday. So, it's a big changes for us on the Korean Peninsula, man. So, really appreciate an awesome year that Steve gave us.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all. And for all the listeners out there, as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and llamas are out. Take care.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks for listening to the show. We'd love for you to connect with us at www.llama-leadership.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/Llama Leadership, and also on Instagram at Llama Leaders. And a big thanks to Mike Whitmer for the music. To check out more of this stuff, go to soundcloud.com/Mike-Whitmer. Thanks again. See you on the next episode.